to get to a level.
Yeah, I'm saying, is there a threshold that you have to reach?
No, I don't know what his criteria or the criteria is, but we didn't have enough devastation that it got declared.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay. And I do want to just really thank the entire team who rallied together very quickly to go out and do an assessment on Christmas morning. You know, we had Michael Burgess, who is here, actually in the helicopter with PD, doing an assessment and doing the flyover and immediately sending us photos and everything that we needed to see just how it looked, so that we would know what we need to do in terms of street closures and putting up barricades and going out and anything else that was needed. I mean, PD was right on it, Public Works, and the entire team. So we do want to thank them for all their work.
Okay.
Anything else?
Anything else? I think that's it. Oh, Councilor Huff.
I just want to say thank you. It's been a lot of questions asked and inquiry minds wondering what all went on. You know, you saw the reporting, you know, in the newspaper and the news and on the radio, you know, what was going on. And then you saw pictures appear on Facebook and everywhere. So I thank you for the update and to explain to the citizens what's going on and what we're doing. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you so
Thanks.
much. Great work by our staff.
And so, Madam Mayor, we're going to call up Deputy City Manager of Finance, Pam Hodge, to talk about the RFP process and local preference. We had some discussion some time ago, and we said that we would come back to you, and we've listed it a number of times, and then we've postponed it, and so we're going to get to that today.
Good afternoon. This is the RFP process. I know there were some questions about what the actual process was when we go through a request for proposal. And so this presentation will just outline the process that we go through. And I know specifically we talked about the local preference, and I can show you where that is part of our process for some particular RFPs. And basically what happens is it's administered by the purchasing division in the finance department, but it's initiated by the user department who assigns a project manager for this particular purchase. And typically what happens is the department contacts purchasing and they want to obtain a particular good or a service, and then the purchasing division then will determine if it's an RFP that's required or if it's just a straight bid where we just need to get pricing. The project manager will then submit the draft of the technical and the detailed specifications, and it's put together in a RFP format, and it also includes the evaluation criteria and weighting based on the specific RFP. And this is where a local preference is, if it's desired, is included in the specification. So it's not required on all RFPs, but if there is a need to have a local preference, it's included in the specifications at the time that the RFP is being drafted. Next step, it's assigned. We go through the administrative process, putting together the file, assigning it a number, adding in all the boilerplate language that's required. And then if a pre-proposal conference or a site visit is needed, this is the time that that would happen. Not all RFPs require a pre-proposal conference or a site visit. It just depends on what the particular RFP is asking for. We go through a review of the draft by the purchasing manager to make sure that everything's included in the RFP, and then that final draft is submitted to the project manager within the user department to make sure that the RFP contains all the information that they're requesting for the bids to be submitted. Then we assign, as the RFP is submitted, we assign a evaluation committee, and this is comprised of 3 to 5 members. We typically look for members who have expertise in that particular area. We can also have advisory, non-voting members that participates on the committee, which is typical in almost every RFP. You'll have more than just the voting members that are participating in the committee to provide information and requirements, and also to assist with questioning and reviewing the proposals. The due date is determined, and we advertise the RFP, and you'll see that in your council packets each week. We'll include the RFPs that are on the street, and when the due dates are, we advertise in local newspapers, on the city's website, the Georgia Procurement Registry, and if it's something particular, we'll put it in a professional publication. But again, that depends on what the good or service is that we're looking for. Existing and potential vendors are registered with the Georgia Procurement Registry, and they'll receive notification for every type of RFP that they have been requested to receive. So they'll go in and determine what types of goods or services that they provide, and so they're notified when there's an RFP available for them to submit a proposal. And as the vendors receive the RFP packages, there may be questions. All questions are funneled through the purchasing division. The user department doesn't respond to questions. It all comes through the purchasing division. They get the responses to the question, and then they put out an addendum to the RFP to notify all potential vendors of any question that's asked and what the response is. So all vendors are working off of the same information. And those responses are posted in the same way that we post the original RFP through the websites and the Georgia Registry. The proposals are received by the deadline. The purchasing manager or the designee, the buyer in that office, reviews all the original proposals to make sure that they have complied, and they record all the information related to all the respondents to that particular RFP. There's a pre-evaluation committee meeting that's scheduled. The committee comes together. The responses are provided to each one of the committee members, and they review the expectation of the RFP and what the user department is looking for. So when they're reviewing the proposals, they know what the request is, and they know what we're asking the vendors to provide to us. They also go through the confidentiality rules. Anything that's discussed in the committee stays in the committee. That's to ensure the integrity of the process, so that only the committee members discuss the particular responses from the RFP, and the interaction with the committee is not released to the public until it actually comes to council, and that's when any of the information is released. The first evaluation committee meeting is scheduled. They go through each particular response as after the committee has had time to review all the proposals, and there's questions, discussions with all the committee members, what they saw within the response, if there is any questions from that particular vendor or from any of the vendors, then those questions are submitted by the purchasing division to that vendor. Sometimes there's questions that come up across the board to all vendors, so that's submitted, and those responses are given back to the committee members for them to assist in their evaluation process. Each voting member individually submits their evaluation form. It's not a group evaluation, it's an individual evaluation, and the buyer then will compile the scoring and review the results with the purchasing manager. Then the committee is brought back together, and they either determine to go with the top vendor, or if they want to shortlist those vendors and to have demonstrations, interview process, site visits, and that's decided on by the committee. And it's unique to each different RFP process, and it depends on the service or the good that's being requested. Sometimes they want to bring in the top 3 and have them do a presentation. Sometimes there's one that just stands out above all others, and so the committee decides unanimously that they're going to select the top vendor to submit to council. So the committee then makes a recommendation, they sign off on that recommendation, and then that's when it will come to council on the city manager's agenda, making a recommendation. And as it comes to council, council has a decision to decide whether to approve or to accept the recommendation from the committee or not. At that point, once council's made a decision, the buyer sends a letter out to all the vendors that were not selected, and then purchasing will coordinate the execution of the contract. And that is the RFP process in a very quick presentation, but I'll be happy to answer any questions. It's typically, depending on the good of the service, a very thorough process, and all the committee members are very involved and responsive in reviewing all the proposals that are submitted, sometimes 3, sometimes we get as many as 10 to 15, so they do go through each proposal thoroughly to make their evaluation.
Clifton, talk for a minute, because I do think this confuses the community. I'm sure every counselor up here, I know I have gotten calls from people or emails from people, sometimes companies that are in other states, Tennessee, and they've said, "Dear Mayor, I'm involved in your RFP process, and I want to tell everybody there how great we are, and I got some more information," or "I don't like the way it's being done, I have all these questions." Explain to us why we cannot take those phone calls and not engage in those email discussions with those people, whether they're in Tennessee or in Columbus, Georgia. Why are we not involved in the process until such time as it comes before us? And then also, I think, maybe elaborate on why it says Company A, Company B, and all that perceived silliness, so that we don't know that it's Smith Building, Inc., or whatever it may be. Explain why we handle it that way.
Well, the main reason you folks around this table are not involved is potential conflict of interest. In our charter, you can't be involved personally or financially with a pending contract or a pending RFP unless it is disclosed to the council in writing through the clerk beforehand. And you certainly can't vote on the matter or discuss it if you are financially interested, personally interested. So, I mean, that's the main reason that this group doesn't get into the details of an RFP or a contract until it's recommended at the end and comes to this table for an award to a vendor. But, you know, the laws vary in different states, but they're similar in that they don't want self-dealing from, you know, government officials.
But even if we're not
any
self-dealing,
contract.
in the past, you've advised me that when I get these emails, I just send them straight to the city manager.
That's right.
I don't
We
even
don't-
deal
we
with
don't want.
Or I send them straight to Pam, and I understand that that's the way I have to do it. And I think you should
Well,
mention that, so
that-
that the citizens know, even though I'm not a builder, even though I'm not in the insurance business, or whatever the contract may be, that we shouldn't know who's
Right.
bidding during the process.
That keeps the process clean. It removes any appearance of an impropriety with respect to mayor and councilors, officials in your position. And it's a neutral party, the purchasing department, committees that look at RFP proposals. They're done in a neutral manner. They try to be totally objective, and we don't want any mayor or councilor involved until the very last stage of the process.
Okay. All right, we have several questions. First with Councilor Huff.
We'll walk back through real quick. What determines having a local preference in the RFP?
That's determined typically by the user department. If there's a need to have a response time, for example, within 30 minutes, or if there's something particular about the good or service that requires it to be a local preference, but there's not a requirement in our procurement ordinance for RFPs that there is a local preference.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. We have Counselor Allen.
Thank you, Mayor. Pam, you talked in Step 8 about how the project manager submits names for the evaluation committee,
Yes.
and then that committee selects their own members, or they select the review committee, or what? How does that work?
Typically, the user department will say, there's people, I guess, let me give an example of the audit contract. We'll select, the finance department will select people to be on the audit contract committee that are familiar with the audit process. So John Redmond, the internal auditor, the accounting manager, the assistant finance director, the deputy city manager in the past has served on the audit contract. So what they typically, the user department is doing is looking for people who are familiar with the process or that good or service, and they'll typically submit names of who they want to serve on that committee. In the
Okay.
past, the purchasing division, who also is involved in obviously all the RFPs, will provide some names of people who have served on prior committees who do a really good, thorough job of the reviewing of the proposal. So sometimes they'll make a suggestion of who else might be good to add to that committee.
The last point, it says all voting members cannot be from the same department. Does that mean a majority of them could be?
The majority of them could be, but we don't want everyone from that department to be on the committee. We want to have a representation from not just that one department, just to ensure the integrity of the process.
But it seems to me that you would want to avoid a majority from that department making up the evaluation committee. I mean, you're only talking about 3 to 5 members.
Well, and I guess just using the audit contract, there's not very many people within the city government that would be familiar enough with the audit process. So what we've typically done is we've had a finance representative, the internal audit, and sometimes the third person is from the finance department. Sometimes the third person was the deputy city manager who was familiar with the audit process. So sometimes you're not able to get more than a majority outside of the department, but as much as we can, it's pretty diverse with different departments. And a lot of times the service crosses departments, so you'll have multiple departments involved.
Well, that makes sense, but I would venture to say if the mayor's receiving a letter from somebody wanting to talk about how good they are, the department heads are receiving similar mails. In my experience on council, we have bailed out several department heads. They're getting the ox out of the ditch, so to speak, because they have met somebody at some meeting somewhere and talked them into using their services. And then the services fail, the person goes out of business, and we're left trying to repair something that has fallen apart. So I guess I would rather err on the side of having people that could look at something impartially and not have everybody from the same department in there. Because if the department head's on the committee and they have subordinates there, they're going to go along with what the department head wants. It just seems to me to have a little cleaner process, you would want to err in that area.
Councilor, I think we can take a look at that. I agree with you. They're probably going to favor what that department head wants if they're division managers, and so we'll take a look at that.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, we have Counselor Henderson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of quick questions. One specifically related to some of the construction bids. How do we make a determination, who makes a determination whether or not we're going to go with a hard bid or whether we're going to use, and I'm uninformed, I know just enough to probably really mess up what I'm trying to say, but the CM at risk? Yeah, because, I've heard people involved in it, so naturally they've got a dog in the fight, but on the heels of looking at a 30% change order on a construction project right now, you know, it does beg the question, if it did cost us an extra 5% maybe by not using a hard bid, are we going to get a truer delivery price? And we've had this discussion, but who makes that decision? How do we decide?
It's typically the decision of the requesting department, but in most of those construction, the large projects, that's really a joint decision with the city manager and the deputy city managers when that moves forward. But typically, on the smaller items, it's the user department that would decide which way. But on larger things like the recycling center or this building, that was a discussion with the city manager. I
just know historically, of course, it may be just the ones that I recollect, but it seems as if when we do hard bid, there are fairly frequent and sometimes significant change orders. And I know it's the nature of the beast because they can't see around corners, but anyway, I just want to make sure we still try to evaluate the two processes and see which one works. And lastly, I'm going to continue. I feel like Don Quixote fighting windmills, and I know it probably isn't even legal. I swear there ought to be some way to recognize the the tenure of contributions by people who have lived, built businesses, and operate within this community. Local preference is a weird thing. I know I even had a very spirited discussion with our previous president of the chamber, who's a good friend, Mike Gaiman, about what constitutes local. And he gave me a pretty good tongue lashing because I was viewing it as people who had built businesses within Columbus, and he's basically saying anybody that has a Columbus address, and I get that. But I still think that there ought to be some way during the process to award points based on some type of length of period that they've been in Muskogee County or their proximity to Muskogee County. I'm not smart enough to figure it out. I think you probably would be. I'd like to see us do something because listen, I appreciate the companies that have relocated here over the last 2 to 5 years and are now involved in business. We value them, and they get a lot of business. But I just think when everything is very, very close, it does not hurt my feelings to see us err on the side of the local businessman that's been paying taxes in this area for the last 25 years. And I don't know. It's my soapbox. I get on it every once in a while and just want to make sure we're not violating any laws, but I would love to see if there's a tangible, reliable, legal way to give just some. You know, we used to give the 2% preference, I think, on automobiles and certain other.
Right. That's part of the procurement ordinance.
That, to me, is more arbitrary than having it tied to something tangible. And we keep asking about it, and I know we've never been able to come up with anything, but I don't want us to give up.
Let's, I think if we called the Carl Vinson Institute or maybe GMA and asked them, because because I agree with you, and then as a devil's advocate, I would say that's assuming that long-running business is one of great repute.
No, and
you know
I agree.
What I mean? And then how do you, knock them a quarter point for not being of great repute?
My comment was geared towards identifying the only time that this minimal advantage would kick in is if everything else is pretty equal, all things being equal. And listen, I'm going to hear from people that have got small offices here and their businesses elsewhere angry about it, and I don't know the answer, but I just in my heart, I want to see our small businesses have an opportunity to compete for government business, particularly. And we went through the recession, and everybody's looking for work, and we had some situations where we had, you know, the big boys can cut their fees more to keep folks paid, and I don't have an answer. But I agree with you. I don't think it should swing the pendulum so far that it's going to put somebody less qualified. But everything else being equal, I do think that there should be some measurable way to identify folks who've been contributing to our community for a long, long time.
Let's see what Carl Vinson and some of those others have done.
Maybe there's a
It's
magic
got to be
wand.
something other communities want to do is help their own folks, and there's got to be a process somewhere, if it's capable of process. Councilor Thomas.
I guess I want to climb up on the soapbox with Councilor Henderson.
Move over.
One of my concerns in the process, I think this issue came up at a council meeting a couple of months ago because we were being asked to change from a local provider to a provider that was not local to Columbus or Muskogee County. And there was some question about why was that being done. And at that time, I recall that we were told that for the automobile and equipment RFPs, there was a local preference, but for services, there was not. And I know that was a concern. It was a concern to me, and I think to a couple of the other counselors. I'm a little nervous, not nervous, that's not the right word. Where this says that that the project manager gets to decide whether or not there's a local preference desired. And I think that kind of standard will get us into trouble quicker than anything else. Unless the standard is, if you meet these certain criteria, then the local preference kicks in. And so I would like to see us take a look at it, and maybe the Carl Vinson Institute is the place to start that. What could be done to install the local preference for services, and do we need to change, for example, what we do for automobiles and other equipment that has just an automatic 2% local preference? I think that we can define what local means, and so I would really request that we do that, and that it come back to us with suggestions on what could be, how could we do this with services as well as goods? Sure. Thank you. I think that was that was part of the original conversation that we were having when we asked for this kind of a report.
That's correct.
Thank you.
All right, that looks like it concludes discussion. Thank you.
And Madam Mayor, I don't, I guess one of the thoughts or concerns might be that a domino effect, if we do it for Columbus and some vendor from Albany who bids on a Columbus project loses the job because of our local preference, then they are probably going to encourage Albany to do a local preference, and someone from Columbus could lose out on a job there, and a domino effect, but that's just a thought. How our local preference might inspire others, and then Columbus businesses lose out in another community because they're not going to let you let their business person lose out to Columbus because they have a local preference and we don't have one down here or over here. And so it could cause problems for
Mayor Portishead, Parade of Horribles.
Parade of Horribles. All right, well, good. Well, I think Carl Vinson, GMA, and some of those are good places. Oh, what's that?
That's a scary part because we don't.
Bring not only the pros of what we'd be looking at for local preference, but the cons, and that's certainly one of them. And we need to have all of that data and information so that when we make a decision, we'll have some good information to go on. And there may be other items that we need to take a look at.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Madam Mayor, I'm going to, I've got one add-on that has to do with detours on Double Churches Road, I believe, and some others that I think you'll want to know about. And so I'm going to ask Director Newman to do that, and then we'll bring Deputy City Manager Hodge back up.
Just wanted to notify you that we have several proposed detours. Of course, we talked about the one on Victory Drive that's already in existence, and hopefully we can get that one back open soon. Another one that we have coming up next week, as far as we know right now, is being mandated by the railroad, where they have to go in and make improvements to the crossing as part of the Double Churches Veterans Parkway project. So we will be closing the eastbound lanes on Double Churches at the Double Churches Veterans Parkway intersection. You'll still be able to make westbound movements. In other words, you could take a left. If you're going north on Veterans, you'll be able to take a left onto Double Churches Road. Or if you're coming south on Veterans, you'll be able to take a right on Double Churches Road. But if you're heading eastbound, so if you're coming down Double Churches headed toward the interstate, you will not be able to make a left-hand turn. You will have, the detour will carry you up Fortson Road to Williams Road, and then from that intersection over to Veterans Parkway, and you'll come back down south on Veterans Parkway. We're expecting, then you could turn right if you needed to.
You can turn right off of Double Churches onto Veterans.
No. All eastbound lanes will be closed from Fortson basically to Veterans Parkway. We anticipate that to take around a month, and again, it's because the safety equipment will have to be removed, and the crossing, the grade crossing, and the new equipment will be installed for the railroad crossing, where that crossing is going to be widened. And then the second one, and I don't have a map on, this was the map, the detour map for the Double Churches veteran. We were notified this week that they are proposing, as part of the Whittlesey project, Whittlesey Road project, to close the intersection of Bradley Park Drive and Whittlesey Road for a few days next week as well. We're trying to get clarification and more information on that, because that's actually a GDOT project, but the contractor did notify us. So we're trying to get more information on that one. So that's three that we know of. One's in existence, and the other two will be next week.
And we're going to get news releases out on these, but we wanted you to be aware before those go out, because those are high traffic volume areas. It's really going to make it even worse.
Okay. I'm sorry, is that Councilor, let's see, we have Councilor Thomas first, and then.
Ms. Newman, suppose I want to go to that office park that's on Double Churches, right across from the drugstore. Am I going to be able to get into that? Is the detour going to be?
We'll maintain access. You will be able to. So if you were coming at Veterans Parkway, you would be able to take a left onto Double Churches and go through and make a left into that park. If you were coming from Double Churches, you would take a right into that.
So I would be, that's a little past, I think, Fortson Road, not a whole lot, but a little bit past.
Well, it's right at the intersection.
At the intersection,
But
yeah.
we would have to maintain that right lane movement in there.
I think it would be helpful, Mr. City Manager, not only to do some kind of a press release, but maybe to make sure that those businesses in that office park know what we're going to do, and also the apartments there, is it now the Palms? It used to be Hamilton Station. That we communicate with them to make sure that they know, while you can still get in there, it's going to be a mess. And so I think if we can specifically let those two, and maybe even the drugstore won't be as affected as some of the others, but
We can
to
do
let
that.
those businesses right in there know what we're doing.
And we typically do that sort of thing, but we can do that.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Let's see, we have Mayor Pro Tem.
Mine is not on this subject, but I do else.
Can I hold you then, because Councilor Henderson has something on this subject.
No, I just have a
Okay.
quick question. You mentioned the intersection of Whittlesey and Bradley Park. Well, they actually intersect in two places, one where Whittlesey kind of dead ends and one where Bradley Park dead ends. Which one?
Well, we're not 100% sure ourselves. We're still
Okay.
trying to get that information. Like I said, they haven't submitted anything to us. They just sent
Okay.
us an email. We're thinking it's the one that's as part of that project.
So
It's on the Whittlesey Road between Whitesville and Veterans Parkway.
Okay.
That's the
All right.
one
So
we're
it's where-
thinking
It's
it's
where Britt David dead ends into Whittlesey, not where Whittlesey,
Bradley Park.
Bradley Park, not where
Yes.
Whittlesey terminates.
That's the one we're thinking it would be.
Okay.
But we're trying to get clarification on that because we had the same thought.
We have Mayor Pro Tem, look, do you want to hold off until this conversation's done? Okay, we've got Counselor Woodson.
Donna, can you make sure if we're gonna, on the Victory Drive, if we're gonna have the detour a little bit longer, that the signs are more, appropriate? Because I went through the Victory Drive and I only saw like 2 detail signs. I just know the neighborhood, so I know how to get to where I need to go. And I also, go ahead.
The problem that we're having is people aren't actually following the detour. The detour is up 185, exit off on Macon Road, down to that short section of Buena Vista Road between Winton Road and 13th Street, and then down 13th Street to Veterans Parkway. Most people, because they know the area, are coming back through the Casita Road area. And that is not the actual detour. Because it is a state project, we maintain the detour on a state route. Because it's a state project and the large volume of traffic that would typically be on Victory Drive, the detour was routed on state routes or federal routes. And because those roads had the capacity to handle the added traffic, people are choosing not to follow the actual detour. And that's why you're not seeing a lot of signs, is because that's not the detour. We typically don't like to detour large amount of traffic through residential areas.
I think too, it's not understanding it and it's not signed correctly because either way you come, like when I went down the Victory Drive and I got there and I wanted to come down to downtown, I had a meeting downtown, all I saw was one sign that said detour to the right. It didn't tell me make a U-turn, get on I-85 and so forth. It didn't tell me that. I just know the community, so I went through, and when I went through, I saw trucks, I saw so many cars, and I thought, this is kind of dangerous. And I got a couple phone calls too, and I said, well, I'm not sure what the detour area really is. Right. And that's why I'm saying that, because we're expressing other details. I think we need to have something a little bit more specific stating, detour, U-turn I-85. And then from there on, because if you don't know anything about detours and you don't know that, what's going on, people are just going to go. And I understand what you're saying. It's a state road, so you're using state roads to detour. But the people in the community and the people that travel and the people that don't belong in Columbus, Georgia, don't know that. So what's happening is people are just following, okay, he turned that way.
Other people.
I'm turning that way. And that's what's happening. And you're getting trucks. I mean, it was a hot mess.
Well, it was, and it still is. Another concern that was expressed was with the Department of Transportation. They were concerned about because typically we would have put up barricades and stopped the traffic from going through there, but they had concern with the large number of businesses in between the detour route and the actual construction site. And that's what's happening, is you get people going to some of those businesses. Some of them may be a business office where people work. Some of them may be like a local business, like I know close to the recycling drop-off, you have that convenience store right there on the corner. And so they're still trying to maintain traffic to those businesses. And then when people get there, they realize they've got to turn, and then that's where some of the confusion. But normally, we would have barricaded it and done local traffic only, so it would only been people that are intentionally going to those businesses that would have went through there or live in that area. But that one was extremely complex.
Yeah, we could just get something that just tells them, turn around, go on I-85, because you're having trucks. I mean,
Yeah.
not no little trucks.
Right.
bigger
And you
than
have a lot of-
20s
a
going
lot of
on.
people.
Because I had one in front of me and one behind me, and I was like, Lord have mercy, I hope neither one of them slammed their brakes.
Yeah.
So, okay, thank you.
All right, and we have, I guess that's it. Oh, well, the Mayor Pro Tem has something, yes.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Can I get an update on Forest Road, please?
Yes, ma'am. As you know, they've been relocating utilities. We do now have final plans that, in the office, we finally got those right before the holidays. We are reviewing those, and we're also starting the contract preparation. So we anticipate it going out to bid next month.
Okay. Next month.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
All right, we have Councilor Huff.
And on that note, Casita Road and the trail, how are we progressing?
It's moving along really well. They're starting now. The buildings will be starting soon. And they're also starting to have the signs and manufactured so that those can be installed. But as far as the construction of the trail itself, it's moving along really well. And then close behind that will be the project that does the bridge across Victory Drive. And that's going to, looks like that timing is going to work out.
Okay. I just wanted to let the American Legion on one side, and we have a new store owner on the other side.
Part of the concerns, and I don't know why it worked out this way, but it seems like all of our construction projects are in areas where we have multiple projects going on at the same time. But some of the utility work that's being done is part of the Casita Road, Joy Road drainage project, which that business did flood, so it's a good thing that we have that project going on. But some of that utility work will also service the trail project.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Director Newman. And so my final update with Deputy City Manager Hodge is Travel Schools and Conference.
Tiasha is just passing out a travel expenditure summary that I'll go through. I'll just wait a couple minutes to get that passed out. And what I looked at was per diem, to include in travel was the per diem, hotel, airfare, registration, education and training, excuse me, and other travel-related expenditures. And I looked at FY14's actual, FY15 actual, and then the budget for FY16. The actuals for FY14 for the general fund, and I separated out the general fund and then the total of other funds. For the general fund was $402,958. That represents 0.25% of the total expenditures in the general fund. So a very minimal amount of expenditures in the relation to the total general fund. The other funds was $90,000 for a total of $493,000 for travel-related expenditures. In FY15, $388,858, again, 0.25% of the total, $95,000 in the other funds for a total of $484,000. The budget in FY16 is $524,833, or 0.33% of the total general fund. The $191,000 in the other funds for a total budget of $716,000. And attached to the summary report is the detail by department of the budget, the actual and the budget for travel-related expenditures, so you can see the department totals within each particular fund. And we are continuing with a travel justification form. We've been doing that for several years. It's required to be signed and approved by the city manager for general government departments and by the mayor for public safety departments. And we ensure that there is compliance with the travel policies and procedures, and that's done in financial planning with the budget analyst and the assistant finance director review all travel-related documents before they are processed. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have on travel.
So these are just departments. No offices?
It would include departments and elected officials. The amount expended and the amount budgeted for FY16.
Oh, okay. All right, let's see, we have, who do we have first? Counselor Thomas.
This was one of the issues that I was very concerned about when we did the budget, and in looking, just, of course, this is the first I've seen of these numbers, but in just looking at them, there are some that, that just blink red lights to me, and I hesitate to point them out to you in public because I don't want these departments to think I'm picking on them. But when the Human Resources Department goes from $751 in FY14 actual to $3,500 in this year's budget, that's breathtaking. You know, when some of these are this great, you know, engineering from $4,300 in FY14 actual to $17,000 in this budget. That was my concern, was we are looking for money at every turn, and yet the overall, again, from $493,000 to $716,000 in years when we are looking at our finances, hopefully, so carefully to make sure that we're spending money appropriately. And it may well be that these are appropriate expenditures. That's why I said I hesitate to, you know, point any out specifically. But it would be difficult, I think, for some of these to be justified in. I don't have any belief that our employees are abusing this. That's not my point at all. But my point is, do we need to take a closer look at what we are funding in order to save money? Is there something that we're sending 3 people to that we ought to just send 2 people to? Are there things that, you know, those kinds of things, because it is a real concern to me when we're, you know, $200,000 over 2 years ago. In 2 years, we've gone up $200,000.
Well,
And let me just say, when I look at this, and you know, I think we need to expand the report a little bit, because I can only assume, and I may be totally wrong, in the one you use as an example, HR, there may have been a one-time something that they sent someone to, they paid a registration fee, I don't know, but we need, and it may come back down after the 1 year, I don't know, but I think we need a category that, with an explanation of why the increase is there.
Well, and to Mr. City Manager, and I'm not saying this is what HR did. Please don't take that. I'm just using this as an example. Suppose the conference that they went to was in Arizona.
Yeah.
They may want to skip that conference this year because next year that conference is going to be in Kentucky, and it's a little cheaper to go to Kentucky than it is Arizona. I mean, you know, but some of those kinds of decisions that I think we need to be really encouraging our department heads and our folks to make those kinds of
Well, why don't we
assessments.
just have a report back on the ones that show some delta, some
Yeah,
more than
and-
10% change or something?
Yeah, and when I looked at this, and you know, I didn't see it before right now, and I have to admit that. But yeah, I have questions too, and so I'll look into that, and I think it needs to be expanded with some explanation, and we'll get that.
And we can also provide the actual budget for FY14 and FY15 and the budget for FY16.
I don't need
think
to go, I think that if we take a look at it, if you guys take a look at it and come back with some information, I just really think that in this budget climate, we need to be very, very careful how we're spending every dime. And I don't want to not send somebody to a conference or a workshop or whatever that they need to go to or required to go to, but we do need to be cognizant of the bottom line. And $200,000 increase in 2 years' time is a little concerning to me.
And I do agree with that.
Okay. Let's get to the bottom of it and figure out what it is, and in the meantime, Councilor Davis.
And outside of mandates or required mandates, I'm just looking at this. I think, off the top of my head, we need to go back to the actuals. I'm a little concerned about the adopted budget amounts. But at the end of the day, the truth and reality is that we should go to the lowest variable on each of these line items and minus a percent and carry it forward, because the counselor's right. I mean, that's just the world we're living in right now with based on the report earlier about the revenue streams coming in. But that does kind of concern me, the difference there when you really look at the adopted budget and the actuals. So that's my 2 cents.
I think, and I agree, I was just looking at mine, Pam, and obviously I came in at, 10% of what had been budgeted. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm very glad for that, but also it was because I didn't have my conferences this year. And so next year or this year, it may well be that. And so, or I wasn't able to go because work. But anyway, it could be those types of things. I have to look back and see. And so I think we need that from the other departments. Why this variation? Why this fluctuation in what you've normally been doing and what's normally been appropriated? Because what I don't spend reverts back, goes to the general fund, which I'm fine with because we need it. So, but when I think we're going to see, it's just my hunch, but I'd like it to see if this is true. When you see these big fluctuations in things like IT or whatever, I bet you it's because their certifications are due, they had to go, their hours are up, they pushed it, delayed it as long as possible, and now they're about to be lapsed. So I think we need to know that to understand those numbers. Or if it's going to Phoenix, then I think that's a discussion we have. But most of our folks know they don't go to Phoenix, they don't go to Las Vegas, they don't go to Australia. Some of these things come in. I can't figure out what cities are ever sending these people to these places. So, Mr. City Manager?
Well, and as I said, I think the report needs to, or we need to expand the look and have an explanation, and we'll do that.
Okay. Yeah, I saw that. So, okay. Anything else?
Madam Mayor, that concludes my agenda, finally.
All right, and we will turn it over then to our Clerk of Council. Madam Clerk.
Madam Mayor and members of council, on the clerk's agenda, items 1 through 7 are memorandums from me advising of upcoming board vacancies for various boards that will be expiring in the month of March. Item 8 is a biographical sketch of Mr. Torrance Goodwin, Councilor Huff's nominee for the Personnel Review Board, as well as a biographical sketch of Mr. Gary Bruce, Councilor Davis nominee for the Recreation Advisory Board. We received notice from the Muskogee County Democratic Party. They are going to be renominating Ms. Linda Parker for the Board of Elections. Have a temporary street closing application from TSIS on Saturday, January 23rd, has already been approved by the police department, just for the council's information. Items 13 through 15, these are resolutions which have been prepared. These items went before the Board of Honor on last week. There was a request to have a sign placed at the walking trail at Waracoa Park in honor of Mr. Jack Key Jr., also a request for a memorial bench at Cooper Creek Tennis Center in honor of the former Assistant City Attorney Jamie Briggs DeLoach, as well as a request for a sign at Heath Park in honor of Mr. Art Osborne.
We have a motion and second to approve items 13 and 14. All those in favor, please state aye.
And 15.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's do that again. I miscalled the vote. We have a motion and second to approve resolutions 13, 14, and 15. All those in favor, please state aye.
Minutes.
Second.
We got a motion and second that minutes be received. All those in favor, please state aye.
On our board appointments, on our Circle Commission, we still have 3 seats that have been declared vacant, and which we'll need nominees for. On our Personnel Review Board, Mr. Torrance Goodwin may be confirmed.
Move confirmation.
We got a motion and second for confirmation. All those in favor, please state aye.
On our Recreation Advisory Board, Mr. Gary Bruce may also be confirmed.
Second.
We got a motion and second for confirmation. All those in favor, please state aye.
And I know the district counselors for District 7 and District 8 are working on those. And also, we've also sent a request to the school district for their representative on this board as well. Taxicab Commission, we are still working very hard to get a replacement for Mr. Billy Kraft. On our Tree Board, we finally heard back from Mr. Consoletti. He would like to serve again if someone would please nominate him. Okay, and we'll bring this back for confirmation at our next meeting. Also, we'll need a nominee for Mr. Chris Coakley as well as Mr. Stephen Smith, who represents the at-large seat. They are not eligible to succeed themselves. And also on our Uptown Facade Board, we are waiting to hear back from Uptown Columbus on a recommendation for this appointment. And that's all I have, Madam Mayor.
Okay. And I believe that concludes our agenda for the day. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. I've got a motion and a second. All those in favor, please state aye. All right, we are adjourned, and we'll see you at our next business meeting. Thank you.